We're now up to 53 people. I think we can go ahead and start. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our 2020 Lunch and Learn series. Today's topic is Houseplants 101 with Caitlin Hastings, the owner of Botanica. And I always want to call it Britannica because of the encyclopedia. I really so just hold on with me. Hold on for 1 second. I'm going to share a screen with you just to go over um, some of our partners, just so you know who helps us put this on. So again, this is our 2020 Brown Bag Lunch and Learn series. And our partners for this series is the City of Birmingham Stormwater Management, Jefferson County Stormwater Program, the City of Leeds Stormwater Management Authority, Alabama Green Industry Training Center with Alabama Cooperative Extension, and the Jefferson County Department of Health, along with my organization, which is the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens. And I'm going to share a poster with y'all, which is the same poster we did about 2 weeks ago, but I think it's still very important to share that it's mulch better, and grass clippings make free food for your grass. So consider leaving your grass clippings on your grass if you're looking to make it a little bit more fuller. They're actually great compost for your grass, and it's a lot safer than putting it on the bag on your sidewalk, because you never know who's going to puncture it, and you don't want that to go into your stormwater drains. So thank you all. And I'm going to cut this down a little bit. Okay. I'm going to introduce Caitlin for y'all. So Caitlin Hastings is a physician assistant and plant enthusiast with a passion for people and houseplants. Botanica is her way of marrying the two. Um, in her own experience of plant shopping, there's always seemed to be a disconnect between finding the perfect plant for your space, a pot that will match your decor, and most importantly, knowing how to keep the plant alive. So she strives to make that experience better for everyone by providing low maintenance plants, modern planters, and detailed care tips that will turn even the blackest thumbs green. And Caitlin has actually put together a handout for you all, but I was having an issue with getting all of your emails so I can send it to you all. But I'm in the process of working on that now, so you might get that email while we're in the middle of the presentation. But she's also taking some notes for you, and she's going to send those along to me for you all. So without further ado, here's Caitlin Hastings presenting Houseplants 101.
Hello, and thank you guys for joining me today and being interested in learning a little bit more about houseplants. Like Dawn mentioned, I have kind of put together a little handout of some of the stuff that we're going to go over today, just so that you guys will have that to kind of look back on and reference later. So she's going to work on sending that out, so don't panic if I get far ahead or anything like that and you need to play catch up. So you'll have that information in just a bit. Let me start out by saying, wherever you are at in your houseplant journey, I do not believe that anyone has a black thumb or a green thumb. Certainly, you know, there are people that do have a green thumb and are better at plants, but I don't believe anybody has a black thumb. I did not grow up with a mom or a grandmother that was really into plants. I kind of did everything that I have done through trial and error. I read a lot about plants, and every time I would get a new plant, I would go to Google and I would just try to learn as much as I could about that plant. And so that certainly helps those of us who have never taken care of any indoor plants before. Everyone kills plants when they're just starting out. So don't beat yourself up if you've tried houseplants in the past and just have not had very good luck with them. I truly believe that with houseplants, it is about finding the right plant for your space, for your lifestyle. And just remember that as we're talking about houseplants, all plants that we bring indoors to enjoy inside of our homes, they all originate somewhere in the world outdoors. So there are really no plants that are grown just to be indoor plants. All the plants that you see in my store or in your friends' homes or in your own home, those are all grown outdoors somewhere in the world. They are native somewhere, and we have just kind of been able to enjoy them indoors. So when we're talking about houseplants, we want to try to replicate the plant's outdoor environment as much as possible, whether that's their light needs, their watering needs, their humidity needs. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go. We're going to talk about some different plants, and I'm going to kind of give you guys a spectrum of some really easy stuff to start out with, and then some of the more difficult things that you may be able to enjoy once you've mastered some of the easy stuff. So there's literally something out there for everyone, and I'm going to go over that with you guys today. I specialize in house plants. If you come to Botanica, we don't have any plants for like outdoor really. I specialize in house plants because I truly feel that, especially in the state of Alabama, where our weather is so crazy and it just changes, from one extreme to the other seasonally, indoor plants are easier because your temperature in your home for the most part stays pretty consistent year round. Whether you are kind of using the air conditioning or the heat in your home, most of us keep our temperature indoors pretty much the same year round. So you don't have plants, experiencing the extreme heat or the extreme cold like you do outdoors. So you can kind of keep your plants happy year round indoors. To me, that's a lot easier than having to kind of replant things every year and check on things when it frosts over and all of that stuff. So houseplants really are easy once you kind of get the basics down. So I'm going to help you guys with that today. The two most important things when we're dealing with houseplants are the light and the watering needs of that plant. So once you master that, you're going to be good to go. So I like to group my plants by their light requirements. So what needs low light, what needs bright light, what needs super direct sunlight, and then kind of the stuff in between. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys because I've made a little PowerPoint that I think is going to help with some of this stuff. So give me just a second to get this up and running. All right.
Quick. Hey everyone. Also to remind you, if you're looking at the screen right now, you might have the PowerPoint and also our video on the side. So if you would like, you could hide your video panel. That way you can see the entire PowerPoint and our faces or our blocks are not blocking you at all. If that makes sense, please let me know with a thumbs up or some type of reaction, or you can put it in the chat.
Yes, you can hide my face. You do not have to look at it the whole time because I do want you guys to be able to see the PowerPoint. So with light requirements, when we talk about low, medium, bright light, indirect light, direct light, what does all that mean? Because light really is the most important thing when you're dealing with houseplants. You want to make sure that you know your plant's light requirements and that you're giving it what it needs. So let's just kind of look at this graphic. This graphic is going to be on that little informational sheet that Dawn sends out for you guys that I've created. So if you're looking over here, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse or not, where you have your direct light, that's going to be right in front of your windows where the sun is just pouring in and it is bombarding your plants with sunlight. For several hours of the day typically. So not all plants like direct hot sunlight. Sometimes that can burn their leaves because again, when we think back to where some of these plants originate in the wild, a lot of these plants, at least the ones that I sell at Botanica, they're all kind of tropical foliage plants that are in, they can be found in jungles or, jungle canopies, things like that. So a lot of these plants, they're not used to getting hot, direct sunlight. They are kind of underneath other plants and they may be shaded by the jungle canopy. So your direct hot sunlight may not be best for all of your plants. We'll kind of walk through some of that stuff. So As a good rule of thumb, I would say the majority of houseplants enjoy bright indirect light. So that's going to be still lots of good sunlight, bright light, but not right in front of a window, maybe right next to a window, so that that light's still pouring in, but they're not getting that sun directly on their leaves to where they can get burnt. And as you move a little bit further back from the windows, that's where you're going to get into your more medium light to low light situations. So just the further back you go, obviously, the less sunlight you're going to get in a room. And like I said, we have plants for all of those light requirements. So the biggest question that I get from a lot of people is, is there a plant? Do you sell a plant that can, thrive without much light or really without a window? And there certainly are some plants. I'm sure you've all been to like a doctor's office or in an office environment in general where they have plants in the office, but there are no windows and the plants are just getting that fluorescent lighting from the light fixtures. And that's fine for some plants. So we'll talk about that too, but there's a whole light spectrum and we have plants that fit all of those things. So we went over the lighting requirements. Let me kind of show you guys some examples of some plants that are on these different spectrums. So your cacti and your succulents. These are going to be in the wild, found in the desert. In the desert, it's very hot. There is no shade, and there's not really ever a lot of water around. So when you're thinking about putting a cactus or a succulent into your home, imagine that plant being in the desert and think about what it needs. So it's going to need really bright light, hot sun, and then not a whole lot of water. So again, you want to mimic that plant's natural environment when you bring it into your home. So with your cacti and succulents, putting them in a windowsill is great. Some of these guys can even enjoy being out on a patio or a porch. Some cacti do grow outside in the state of Alabama, but we'll talk about them indoors here. So again, really bright light for these guys. It always pains me whenever people say, oh, I don't have much light, but I want a succulent. I'm like, okay, let's maybe choose a little bit more functional plant for your space, or let's put, the succulent somewhere else in your home where it's going to get enough light. So again, with the watering, these guys don't have to be watered very often, maybe once or twice a month. You want to let their soil completely dry out before you water them again, because with cacti and succulents, they are very drought tolerant. They're used to being in the desert where it doesn't rain very often. So even when their soil feels very dry, they are great at storing water in their leaves and in the body of the plant. So they can actually go a pretty long time without being watered. So I kind of use a good rule of thumb as, watering once or twice a month with these guys. I do also want to mention, while we're kind of on the subject of watering, that overwatering is the easiest way to kill houseplants with outdoor plants, because it is real hot outside and the water evaporates from the soil a lot quicker. You may have to water your outdoor plants multiple times a week. I do not water anything in my store or in my home more than once a week. So you can really get away with about once every 7 to 10 days for most of these plants, or longer. So with the cacti and succulents, you can water them about once or twice a month. That's about every 2 weeks, maybe every 4 weeks, depending on how fast your soil is drying out. So that's the biggest problem that I see with most people's houseplants, is that they're overwatering. They're loving them to death. So you really can let most of these things dry out before you water again. It's a lot easier to correct underwatering than it is overwatering. Once you put too much once you put too much water in the soil, the plant's roots have a really hard time recovering from that. And so if you need to add more water because you haven't watered enough, that's a lot easier than taking that water out after the soil is already saturated and your plant's already unhappy. So that's a good rule of thumb. When in doubt, underwater, don't overwater. You can always add more. So that's our deal with cacti and succulents. Let's keep moving on. The Calathea family. Not a super popular group of plants, but probably my personal favorite just because of the beauty of the leaves. Every single leaf has this crazy cool pattern on it, and they are gorgeous. Calatheas are going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum from cacti and succulents. So they kind of like low to medium light. Their leaves get burned very easily, and actually if they're getting too much light, their leaves will kind of close up so that it's kind of like the plant's defense mechanism. They close up their leaves to avoid getting too much sun. So you may have heard these plants called the prayer plant family before, and that's because their leaves really do move. They kind of bow and rise with the sun each day. So a lot of people call these prayer plants. Calatheas, like I mentioned, they're going to love that lower light, and they don't like to dry out. So I kind of make sure I'm checking the soil close to every 5 to 7 days. You know, by day 7, they usually need to be watered. They also love humidity. So some people have issues with these. These can be a little bit more finicky, a little bit more difficult for that reason. It's kind of hard to monitor the humidity levels in your home when we're blowing the air conditioning in the summer and we're blowing the heat during the winter. So a lot of people do kind of put these in a bathroom where it's a little bit more of a humid environment. Or they may put them near a small humidifier just to kind of keep them happy, keep their leaves from getting brown and crispy. But these are all different types of Calatheas, and again, their leaves are just stunning to me. They're all so different. You can kind of see on the middle plant there with kind of the white splotches. Anytime you see white on a plant's leaf, not just green, but some white in there, there can also be other colors, pinks and purples and things like that. That's called variegation. So variegation simply just means that it's kind of it's not the normal version of the plant, it's a little bit different variegated version. So the leaves look a little bit different. Typically variegation comes in the form of the color white, and when you do have variegation, sometimes if the plant's not getting quite enough light, it will tend to lose that variegation and it will revert back to just a solid color leaf. So even though the Calatheas do enjoy a little bit lower light, medium light, making sure they're getting enough light is important, just if you've got any variegation going on, so that they don't lose that. And there's a lot of different examples of variegation out there. Everybody loves now the variegated monsteras, and you can buy like one cutting of a variegated monstera, a fancy monstera, online for like $200 now. It's crazy. So everybody's into the variegated stuff, but now you kind of know what that means. All right, so that is our Calathea family, opposite end of the spectrum from the cacti and succulents. The Dracaena or the Dracaena family, these are really cool. They kind of have a mind of their own as they grow. You can kind of see that some of these are more tree-like, and they kind of have a stem that kind of follows them to the top. As a good rule of thumb, anything with a tree-like trunk at the base is going to be more drought tolerant. So if the soil, you can kind of let the soil dry completely out on these guys, and then water whenever the soil's dry, because they do retain a lot of moisture in that stem, in that stalk or trunk of theirs. So Dracaenas are great because they are very low maintenance. They can kind of do more medium to bright indirect light. Again, with this really pretty guy in the middle here with the white stripes, you see that variegation. And so that one may require a little bit more light just to keep that white variegation. Otherwise, the new growth may revert back to being like a completely green leaf instead of having that pretty white on it. So these are a really fun family. If anybody ever asks me for a low maintenance large floor plant, like for the corner of a room or something, I usually encourage them to try a Dracaena, just because they are more low maintenance than some other options. The fern family, people either have a love or a hate relationship with ferns. I feel like if you can master ferns, you can really master anything. Indoor ferns are tricky because they do love humidity typically. And again, sometimes it's hard to monitor the humidity in your home with the heat or the air blowing So with ferns, you kind of want to make sure they're not near an air vent, so that they're not getting a draft blown on them all the time. There's tons of different ferns. My personal favorite is the bird's nest fern, which is the far left picture on the screen. They are just a little bit more low maintenance, a little bit easier to care for than some of the more delicate ferns. They don't have to have as much humidity. So some ferns are epiphytes, which just means that in nature, they grow on like the sides of trees rather than in the ground. And it's really interesting that some ferns can grow that way, because we're so used to thinking like, oh, ferns need a ton of water, ferns need a lot of humidity. And then there's these ferns like the staghorn fern and the bird's nest fern that really can grow on the side of like a rock or a tree or something. And so with your epiphytic ferns, you can get away with a little bit more, they're a little bit more tolerant of neglect. So I usually like to start people with those. You may have seen them mounted. A lot of people like to mount those staghorn ferns on the wall. That's something that we've started selling at Botanica because people really like that. It kind of looks like antlers being mounted on the wall, but it's a plant. And so with those, they can go a little bit longer without watering. The maidenhair fern, the bright green guy on the far right over here, everybody loves a maidenhair fern, but they are pretty finicky. And so again, maybe ferns aren't the greatest to start out with right away, but we do have some options that are pretty low maintenance if you do like ferns and want them inside of your home. All right, now we come to the ficus family. Fiddly figs, the tree that you see on the left over here. Fiddly figs have skyrocketed in popularity. My rule of thumb, if you're coming to shop with me, is you do not get to have a fiddly fig, or at least a big one, as your first plant, because they are they're kind of the bane of my existence. I have a love-hate relationship with them. I have one at home that's beautiful. I've had it for years. I love it. It's been an easy plant for me, but they're not always easy. They can throw you for a loop. They're very finicky. They'll drop leaves if they don't get enough light. The ficus family in general likes really bright light, indirect light, because if they do get that direct sun, their leaves can get burned. So a lot of people think they have enough light for something in the ficus family, but once they get it in their home, it starts dropping a lot of leaves, and then you're left with a twig, and you lose all of that green foliage. So ficuses are kind of something that I like to have people work up to. I don't want anybody to come into my store and waste, $60 or $100 for a big fiddly fig when they're not super certain how to care for it. If you want to do that, that's fine. I just don't recommend it. So we just have a lot of other better options than maybe the ficuses. But I do also sell some small fiddly figs if you want to try it and see if you get enough light. Again, with these guys, because they are more of like a tree and have kind of a woody stem, you can let them dry out a good bit before watering. So I typically water every 7 to 10 days on these. And then again, down here at the bottom, you can see the really cool white variegation on this ficus. It almost looks like camouflage. And so with the more white variegation, the more bright light you're going to need. I have made the mistake of not giving my plant like this enough light, and it dropped a lot of leaves. So it is very important that you get adequate light with your fiddly figs and your rubber trees and anything in that ficus family. And palms are obviously very popular in Florida, where it's very humid and it's a very tropical environment and things like that. So you want to kind of mimic that. If you're going to put a palm inside of your home, keep it away from your air vents, any drafts. The more humidity, the better. The palm that you see on the left side of the screen is called a Parlor Palm, and that one is actually a very easy starter plant that I recommend for people. It's a little bit more tolerant to drying out and not having as much humidity. These can do kind of medium light. They don't have to be right in front of a window. There are certainly some palms that can take full sun, but the Parlor Palm is nice because it can kind of be set back away from a window a little bit, and they are also non-toxic to pets and children, and so that's a really nice plant for a lot of people to start with. Philodendrons, this is my favorite family because there's such a variety of plants in the philodendron family. And to me, these just look the most tropical. They kind of give you the most bang for your buck in your home as far as putting out beautiful big leaves with a lot of different variety. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see the Monstera. Some people call this a Swiss cheese plant just because of the slits in the leaves. This is actually a really easy plant to start out with because it tells you what it wants. These guys, if you ever have a Monstera at home and the new growth is coming out with leaves that do not have holes in them, it's just a solid leaf without any slits in the leaves, that simply means that the plant is just not getting enough light. And so, you know, it's nice when a plant tells you what it needs rather than just kind of dropping leaves like a fiddle leaf fig does. I love my plants that tell me what they want. So if they, you know, get super sad and droopy, I know they need water. If they, like the Monsteras, if the new leaves don't have slits in them, they can live like that. That's fine. They don't look as cool, but you just have to move it a little bit closer to a window. So the philodendrons are great. These guys can kind of do bright indirect light. Sometimes they can do a little bit more medium light. These are typically found under the jungle canopy. A lot of these guys actually, even though they look more bushy and they're in pots in these photos, most of the philodendron family are climbers. Even the Monsteras, the Swiss cheese plant, in nature, they actually climb up the sides of trees. So on a lot of these, if you use a moss pole or a totem pole or something in your pot, you will actually see that plant start to climb towards the ceiling. And I've actually got one at my house that unintentionally is growing up my wall. It just kind of attached itself to the wall and it's just taken off. And so these are really cool. A lot of these have really neat shaped leaves. These are much more forgiving than your ficuses. Philodendrons are unfortunately toxic if ingested. And so I don't always recommend these if you have kids or pets at home and you're not sure if they're gonna, you know, kind of nibble on the leaves or anything. So they are a very easy starter plant, but just remember they can be toxic if ingested. Love the philodendrons. You can definitely let these dry out again in between watering because they're found on trees. They may not always get the most water, so they're really good at conserving water as well. The Pothos family, I feel like everybody probably has a Pothos or has seen a Pothos. It's also called devil's ivy. So just a trailing plant, climber if you want it to be, if you kind of train it to grow up something. These are very tolerant of neglect. You can really let them go a while without being watered, and if they get too thirsty, they'll kind of start to get sad and droopy and let you know. So these kind of talk to you as well. Tons of different varieties of pothos, some that are solid, some that are, you know, variegated in different ways, and so you really can't go wrong with the pothos. They can do bright light or low light. They're super easy. Definitely recommend everybody have a pothos somewhere in their house, even if you don't this is one of those plants that can kind of grow with just fluorescent lighting in, you know, an office setting or something like that. So pothos are very easy to care for. These can be toxic too, so definitely watch out for that. So there are obviously a lot of other plants, house plants. We sell tons of them. I'm not going to touch on all of them because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. My goal was to kind of just give you some of the more popular families of plants, things that are super easy to care for or maybe not so easy to care for, so you know what to avoid if you're just kind of starting out on your journey. But most importantly, you want to know your plant's light needs and its watering needs. That's the quickest way to kill a plant, is if you put it in the wrong place in your home, or if you're not watering it enough, or if you're watering it too much. Like we said, overwatering is the easiest way to kill houseplants. So try starting out at once a week. If you need to go a little bit longer than that, that's what I would recommend. Another good piece of advice is to rotate or turn your plants inside of your home every few weeks so that you can promote even growth. You'll notice that plants do tend to grow towards the sunlight. So if you have a plant in the corner of your home, it may start to get a little bit lopsided as it starts to grow towards the sunlight. So all you have to do to fix that problem is to just spin it. You can spin it like a quarter turn every few weeks if you want to, or if it's just really lopsided, just go ahead and flip it 180 degrees and start letting it kind of even itself out and grow back the other way. You do always want to water your house plants less during the winter months. Just like with your outdoor plants, indoor plants have a growing season. It's typically spring and summer, and then they start to slow down in the fall. And this is just because in the wintertime, fall and wintertime, as the seasons change, the sun is not as bright, it's not as hot, it's not up as long each day. And so your plants kind of go into a dormant period where they don't need all that water or fertilizer or, you know, that much care really in the winter months because they are dormant, and you can definitely drown them if you're still watering them excessively like you do in their growing season. So always cut back on watering your plants a little bit in the winter months. Just kind of fill the soil, see if it's still wet. If it is, just hold off on watering. Even if it's been 7-10 days, you do not want to drown your plants in the wintertime because unfortunately they probably won't come back in the spring and summer. As far as repotting goes, I do get a lot of questions about how often to repot a plant, how you know when it's time to repot a plant. If you ever see roots coming out of the bottom of your pots, definitely a sign that your plant is looking for more room. So when you go to repot your plants, I typically repot every 2 years unless my plant is giving me signs that it needs to be repotted. It may, the leaves may start to appear to be a little less vibrant. If they were green, they might kind of be like a yellowy green now or kind of a faded green. That is kind of telling you like, hey, I'm not getting as much nutrients out of the soil as I need. So I need to be repotted. So you kind of repot for 2 reasons. One, your plant outgrows its pot and it's really root bound and the roots just have nowhere else to go. And your soil is where all of your plants get their nutrients from, unless you're adding some fertilizer to your plants. So with adding new soil, when you repot your plants, it's just kind of adding more nutrients in that the plants can get out of that soil and continue to grow. So when I repot, I only recommend going up in pot diameter 1 to 2 inches at a time. So for example, if you have a 4-inch plant, that's kind of a smaller plant. A lot of nursery pots are 4 inches in diameter. If you've had it in that pot for a year or 2 and you want to pot up, go ahead and go up to a 5 or a 6-inch pot. The reason for that is you can certainly make the plant go into transplant shock if you go up too much. The roots kind of get overwhelmed because they have almost too much room to grow. So I only recommend going up in pot size 1 to 2 inches in diameter each time you repot something. And then I was going to mention as well that I get a lot of questions about potting soil. Potting soil certainly is important. I don't like for people to focus too much on potting soil when they're just starting out. My rule of thumb is if you can get a bag of indoor potting soil, that's going to go a really long way for your houseplants. And then if you get a bag of perlite as well, perlite, when you open it up, it kind of just looks like little pellets of styrofoam. It's white. Some indoor potting soils have some perlite in them already. It's the white chunks in the potting soil that you see in addition to the fertilizer. But if you buy a bag of perlite separately, you can mix that in with your potting soil in different quantities for different plants. So for example, take that bag of your indoor potting soil. If you have a cactus or a succulent, something that the soil does not need to stay wet on and it needs to kind of drain really well, I usually do a 50-50 mixture of that indoor potting soil and perlite. You don't have to do anything fancy like buy a whole bag of just cactus and succulent mix. You know, you can use what you've got, just add more perlite to it if the plant needs more drainage. For like your Calatheas and your Ferns and those things that kind of, you know, they don't like to dry out completely, I use less perlite on those. So good rule of thumb, buy a bag of indoor potting soil, buy a bag of perlite, and just kind of mix them together as needed for your different plants. So that, let me stop sharing my screen here. That's the end of my PowerPoint. And when Dawn sends out this little reference sheet that I made you guys, I did put the tips on there for you that we just went over, so you'll have those to remember. And then I've also listed a few very easy starter plants that I recommend, and kind of why I recommend those, so that if you're ever looking to kind of grow your collection, or even if you're looking to gift a plant to someone who, you know, wants to try plants but may not be great with them, I've made you guys a list of some super easy starter plants. And you can always go to our website. It's botanicabhm.com. On our website, you can filter for different plants by easy starter plants, pet safe plants, and low light plants. And we're very passionate at Botanica about making sure you're educated about your purchase. So if you do buy a plant from us, on our website, we have all the care instructions for every single plant, what kind of light it needs, what kind of water it needs, where it's, you know, found in real life. And if you ever come into our store, our associates are very great about making sure, hey, do you need any help with the care instructions for this plant? Do you have any questions? You know, so we want to make sure that you can keep stuff alive, and you can always reach out to us if you have any questions about your purchases from us, because we want you to be able to enjoy them for a long time and not just take them home and be sad that they didn't make it. So that concludes the end of my presentation, kind of short and sweet, just kind of hit the high points. So I would love to answer some questions from you guys if you have any.
Coming back. Hey, everyone. So if you have any questions, there should be a question and answer box at the bottom of your page where you can put in a question, but we also have some questions in the chat that I'm going to read to you for you to answer. So someone, Jan Hirsch said, do you find the plant soil thermometers work well?
I use the plants. I've not really used the thermometers for potting soils, but I have used the moisture meters. I think that may be an option. Like if you buy a moisture meter, it may have some different options there for like your lighting and your temperature and things like that. So definitely I know the moisture meters work really well, kind of for some of your larger plants that you may not can feel, you know, deep down in the roots if it's still wet or not. I have used moisture meters a good bit, and they are very, very helpful to kind of get down deeper into the roots to see if your plant is dry or not.
Robert Kleins asks, can you use a tray of rocks under the Calatheas?
Calatheas, yes.
With water in the tray for humidity.
Yes, that's a great option. So a pebble tray is exactly that. You take a tray or a bowl or something that you can fill rocks in, and then you pour some water just even with the top of the rocks. Sit your plant down inside of it so that it's just sitting on top of the rocks with the water underneath. And the goal is not to water the plant with that water. It is just to increase the humidity level around the plant. So pebble trays work great for Calatheas. They work great for ferns. That is, full disclosure, that's the only way I'm able to keep a maidenhair fern alive is with a pebble tray. So yes, pebble trays are fantastic if you don't want to invest in a humidifier. Absolutely.
I had Teresa Milliken suggest asparagus fern for people when you were talking about the ferns, saying that that's a really good one if you want to start off.
Absolutely.
Where can we access the recording of this talk? So we're recording the talk right now. What's going to happen is I'm going to get Jamie, who is in our marketing department, to edit it, and she's going to put it on YouTube, and then I send you all an email. But you can also just go to our Facebook page, because they also put it up on our Facebook page if the email comes a little slower than them posting it on our Facebook page. So it will be available soon, hopefully. I'm still trying to get the one about shade gardening up. So just bear with us. We've been doing a lot of recording for the past month or so. Any recommendations for a particular potting soil for indoor plants? What about fertilizers? I think you touched on that.
Yeah, so I do sell some indoor potting soil at the store. It's by a company called Good Dirt. They've kind of formulated a really nice mix so that it does not allow moisture retention. It doesn't allow the roots to get bogged down with moisture. And I also carry their plant food, which is a great fertilizer for indoor plants. As for potting soil, you know, I've certainly gone to Lowe's or Home Depot before and just bought the blue bag of like the moisture control potting soil. Again, I still do recommend adding some more perlite, because that, even though that moisture control soil is supposed to not retain moisture, you know, these big box companies don't always make the best products. They just kind of, you know, quantity over quality sometimes. So that's why we sell the Good Dirt soil at our store and the Good Dirt plant food. They're a small company that, you know, we love working with them because their products are great. But the plant food that we sell in our store or on our website, it's nice because it does not burn your plants like a lot of other heavy fertilizers will. And it lasts a really long time. It comes in a bottle with a pump. And so you do 1 pump of plant food per gallon of water. So I use it on all my plants at home about once a month. You don't have to do it every time you water. But I have seen more growth on my personal plants since I started using plant food fertilizer. You only want to fertilize indoor plants during their growing season though. So spring and summer, don't fertilize in the fall or the winter because they don't need it. They're not going to grow much during that time.
Do you have orchids and air plants at your store?
I have air plants. We don't do a lot with orchids at Botanica. They are epiphytes though, so you know they can kind of dry out a little bit. We don't do a ton of like flowering plants. We do more of the tropical foliage kind of stuff, but we do have air plants, and those are so fun. If you don't get a lot of light, or if you want something low maintenance, air plants can just kind of be soaked in water once or twice a month, and then you know they're great. If you're not familiar with air plants, they don't require soil. They're just kind of, you know, they're epiphytes as well. They kind of grow on the sides of trees and things in the wild. They're very, very easy to care for.
And Jan came back and said she did mean a moisture meter, and this talk was wonderfully helpful, and many thanks.
Good. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Jenny Park wants to know if you have any tips getting orchids to rebloom.
I'm not good with orchids. Full disclosure, I have a lot of people ask me about orchids and a lot of people that ask me about outdoor plants, and I tell everyone you do not want my help with that stuff. So I have not been successful at getting orchids to rebloom either. So we're in the same boat there.
And if you haven't been in touch with them yet, Jenny, you can actually get in touch with the, I think it's the Birmingham Orchid Society.
Yeah.
They usually meet here at the gardens. I'm not sure whether they're meeting now, but they should be on Facebook, and you can always contact them, and they're always ready to help anyone. I have some more questions. Do you recommend, is it bromeliads?
Bromeliads.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bromeliads are great. You can kind of lump them into the cactus and the succulent family. We do have some at the store right now, and they put out beautiful flowers. Now, those flowers don't last forever, just like with any plant. They're going to bloom, and then they're going to eventually lose that flower and then rebloom. But bromeliads are a great starter plant, just like with cacti and succulents. They can take full sun if you want them to. They only have to be watered, you know, once or twice a month. They're great starter plants for sure.
Okay, so I have a question and a question and answer. Laurel feels that she overwatered her peace lily, and the leaves are drooping. Any suggestions for how to save it?
So typically with peace lilies, they're one of those plants that talk to you. When the leaves get really droopy, typically that means they need to be watered. With overwatering, a lot of times you'll see yellowing of the leaves, especially those bottom leaves, like the oldest leaves on any plant. That yellow a lot of times means overwatering. So what I would do, if you feel like you've overwatered a plant, if your plant, this is something I didn't really touch on, but I can really quickly, about pots with drainage holes versus no pots without drainage holes. If your pot has a drainage hole, you know, it's going to be fine. Eventually that soil will dry out. If you are putting a plant in a pot that does not have a drainage hole, you may want to just remove that plant from the pot if you feel that you've overwatered, and just put it in a new pot with some fresh, dry soil. and don't water it for a little while. Just kind of let it dry out. You can always use the pot that it was in, just empty out that wet soil, clean it out, and then put fresh new soil in there. That's honestly how I learned that I was overwatering plants. Was I started out by, I put my plants in pots without drainage holes, which a lot of people will tell you is a big no-no. It's kind of nice because you don't have to worry about a mess or like taking your plants over to the sink every time you want to water them. So at my house, everything I have is in a pot that does not have a drainage hole, except my cacti and my succulents. And I just water less. I water every 2 weeks instead of every 1 week, and I don't put as much water in there as I would if it had a drainage hole. So starting out, you may want to go with a pot that has a drainage hole so you can monitor the moisture level, make sure you're not overwatering. And a lot of people too, if you have a pretty pot or a bowl or something that doesn't have a drainage hole, but you want to use it for plants, just keep your plant in its plastic nursery pot and just sit the whole thing down in that pot. So you kind of have the decorative pot on the outside and then the plant in its plastic nursery pot on the inside. So that way you can still take the plant out to water it when it dries out, and then just put it back in there, and it's super cute.
Do you recommend soil conditioner or compost with indoor plants?
I really haven't seen a need for it, honestly. As long as you're repotting your plants every couple of years to kind of continue to let them grow, and then adding fresh, nutrients back into the pot in the form of new potting soil. Soil conditioners and sometimes even fertilizers really aren't necessary for indoor plants.
Where is Botanica located?
We are located in downtown Birmingham. We are on Richard Arrington Jr. Boulevard North. That's that one way that goes straight to City Hall downtown. And we are right across from the YMCA. So if anybody wants to jot down our address, it is 312 Richard Arrington Jr. Boulevard North. Longest address ever. That's also 21st Street for those of you that are kind of confused. So 312 Richard Arrington Jr. Boulevard North. And again, we're right on that one way on the left-hand side of the road.
So that is all of the questions that I have. Everyone else is just saying that this was very informative, and they are thanking you so much, telling you how helpful and fantastic you've been.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And again, I don't want anybody to feel intimidated in their plant journey, no matter where you're at. We've got something for everybody. I have people all the time that come into the store and say, I don't know anything about plants. I don't have any plants, but I want some. Where do I start? We'll help you. So don't ever be intimidated to come in.
All right, and I'm sorry for butchering some names, y'all. I'm still working on my plant names. I took very elementary Latin in high school and college. I got one more message. Let's see if nope. It's just someone saying thank you and that they'll visit your shop. So we are going to end today's Lunch and Learn. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here, Caitlin. It was really, really a great honor.
And I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
This is a great presentation. I've been seeing a bunch of people become plant moms and plant dads during COVID, and hopefully this will help some people that are new and starting out. So thank you all for joining us today. See you all later.
Thank you guys.